today what I want to talk about, it's interesting because the four things that I like to talk about when I do public lectures are global poverty, but Jay did such a great job. The philanthropic sector, and Gina did a great job. Shopping, no one's talked about that yet, but I won't. And how cities grow, how cities develop, and in particular how this city has grown and how it has developed. And I thought that we could spend some time together talking about the patterns of growth of this city and what implications that has on how we live our lives, how we build community, and what that word community really means. So this all started because every Saturday morning over my cereal, I look at the Calgary Herald New Homes section and I see this very strange and troubling map. Which is strange and troubling for many, many reasons. One of the reasons it's strange is because the scale is completely messed up. This is the existing city here, and then these are the suburbs. The reason it's troubling, and I know you can't see it, but I did that a bit on purpose. The reason it's troubling is because it's color-coded. And it's color-coded in terms of new neighborhoods by what sorts of people ought to live there in terms of income. Pink is starter homes, and in Calgary, a starter home means a home that costs less than $300,000. Blue is estate homes, and that means a home that costs more than $750,000. And if you were to be able to see the colors, and we'll talk much more about this, you'll see that we're building neighborhoods where only a particular kind of people live. And I thought this was challenging. And I thought to myself, has it ever been thus? Have we always segregated ourselves into neighborhoods, into communities by income? And that led me to a series of interesting explorations. I graduated from the University of Calgary in 1993 and left Calgary in 1994. And I spent 7 or 8 years living in great cities all over the place, Toronto, Boston, New York. And I came back here in 2001. And I thought it was interesting to see how the city has changed, and importantly, how the city has not changed over that time period. So when I left, we had about 750,000 people. Now we have about 1.2 million. I went back to my parents' old house and tried to figure this part out. How long did it take to drive downtown from my parents' old house when it wasn't rush hour? About 12 minutes. Now it's still about 12 minutes. Rush hour, on the other hand, used to take about 20 minutes. Now it takes about 45. Of course, understanding that, our city has been very, very good about building up alternative transportation systems, reducing our car dependency, and really investing in public transit. So when we started, we had 31 C-train stations, and now that we've got just about double the population, we've got 37. Some things change. And of course, when I left, there was this wonderful thing happening in the East Village. Great ideas on the table, construction going to start soon, and now I hate to think about how many years later, 16 years later, well, we'll move forward someday. Now, I'm being lighthearted here, but there are some more serious issues. And this is probably the most important one. When we looked at the number of homeless people when I left in the annual homeless count, which we do every May, or it's biannual actually, but we do it every couple Mays, 447 people on a given night living without their own roof over their heads. When we repeated that last year, it had gone up nearly 10 times. So clearly something isn't working well. And we have to start thinking about our city in a very different way than we've thought about it in the past. Not as a city of 300,000 people, just a bit bigger, but as a community where our issues, our problems, our challenges, but also our opportunities happen at a completely different scale. And that's really the kind of thing that I wanted to start thinking about here. And I like to put it very starkly. Calgary has a choice. And the choice is to become one of two cities. I'm not being that pejorative, because these two cities happen to be two of my favorite cities in the world. But when they were about Calgary's size, they chose very different paths to move forward. So one of them is Los Angeles. Seen the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit? He's jumping on the streetcar. This little kid says to him, "Sir, don't you have your own car?" And he said, "Who needs a car? LA has the best transit in the world." It's actually true then. But they started building freeways in the 1940s, removed their transit rail lines, and commuters by car, truck, or van in LA, about 85%. Another large city that I've had the chance to visit, Curitiba in Brazil, made a very different decision in the 1970s. They chose universal access over the private car. They still have very high rates of car ownership, but people don't use the cars for their daily commutes. They redesigned their streets, and about 75% of people commute by transit. The question that then arises is, well, yeah, true, but Calgary is different. The way that we've grown is different. We have lots of land around us. We have lots of ability to continue to grow, and really there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone wants their own backyard, their own little piece of green in the world, and it's social engineering not to do that. So one of the things I started to do with the assistance of my colleague Natalie O'Toole at Mount Royal University is to start using some mapping software, some geographic information software, to start looking at the evolution of Calgary and how things have changed. My thesis being that people are not living together, they are living more and more apart as the city grows. So this here is a map of diversity, ethnic diversity by neighborhood in Calgary in 1991. The darker, the more ethnic. I didn't do that, the computer did that. This is the neighborhood that I live in, okay? Coral Springs. And at that time, 1996, Coral Springs was about 50% non-white. It was by far the most non-white neighborhood in the city, except for Chinatown. And the whole city as a whole was about 16% non-white. Picture in 2006 is very different. Coral Springs is now about 82% non-white. And the rest of the city is about 20-ish% non-white. So things have changed. Very few kids go to school like my cousin did and graduate from high school as the only non-white student in school. But at the same time, something is troubling that you can see if we were to take a red line and draw it down Crowchild Trail, deke around the university, go around downtown, we have two very different cities. The city on top is about 40% non-white. The city under the red line is about 8% non-white. And I use a red line on purpose, by the way. It refers to the practice of certain real estate agents in the United States to redline neighborhoods, to actually say to people, you can't live there, that neighborhood's not for you. And there's ample evidence that that sort of thing happens in Calgary. There are some serious challenges here. It's not just that the people on the bottom are cursed with bad restaurants and they really love curling. There are some very serious issues that have to do with when we don't mix up our neighborhoods. Very quickly, I'll go through a few more of these. This is kids between 0 and 14. Back in 1991, we see that most neighborhoods have lots of children in them. The change here is more subtle but interesting. 2006. See what's happening? The areas in the middle are lightening up. The ones on the very edges are getting darker. Calgary Board of Education has as many students today as it did in the year 2000. However, we say we're short 34 schools because the kids are not living in the neighborhoods where the schools are. Very, very serious implications on how we plan a city. This is seniors, okay? 1991, 2006. People are trying to age in place. They're trying to stay in their same neighborhoods as they get older. But the housing stock might not be right. There might not be condos for them to move into. There may, in fact, not be services for them to be able to access. Last thing I want to talk about when we look at these maps is income. This is 1991. Income pieces. So you see the darker, the richer. But by and large, back then, the city of Calgary was pretty average. Most neighborhoods were average. They had rich people and they had poor people living in them, and it's sort of mixed up in this mean. When we got to 2001, it started to look a little bit different. We started to see some neighborhoods that were less wealthy, some that were more wealthy. When I looked at 2006, I was super happy because the problem seemed to have solved itself. We're all average again. Then I looked at the numbers carefully, and I realized that it was because these neighborhoods had average household income greater than $800,000. So the first decile, everything in light yellow, was everyone between $25,000 and $140,000. Not very helpful. So I tried a different way to skin the cat. The pink neighborhoods are the neighborhoods back in 1991 that were 30% below the median income in Calgary. So there's a few of them. Interestingly, and contrary to popular belief, none of those are in my part of the city in the northeast. But there are a few of them. By 2006, it starts to look quite different. And we start to have very serious pockets of poverty that occur throughout the city. We can flip it around and look at those neighborhoods that are that were 30% above the average income, 1996, 2006. It's very interesting here. Where are they getting a new LRT? Where are they getting a new high school? Okay, these things have implications as we move forward. One thing that doesn't change, by the way, crime. People tend to think that low-income neighborhoods or high ethnic neighborhoods, let's not put too fine a point on it, are areas where there is high crime. Statistics don't bear that out. This is crime against people, pretty much scattered across the city. This is crime against property. Again, pretty much scattered around the city. This matters. And it matters because everyone you ask who thinks about the future of community and about city talks about this importance of mixing. I'm going to share with you a couple of quotations. Maybe I wrote them both, but they're good. They were on my computer. It was easier than Googling. The first one is actually Calgary's 100-year vision. the work of Imagine Calgary. And you'll see that it suggests that communities need to be mixed in order to be safe and just, that they need to welcome meaningful participation from everyone. Back in 2001, 2002, I got to work with an organization called Canada 25, a group of young Canadians living around the world talking about what was important to them and why they made the choices to live where they live. And you'll see what they said here. We're unanimous in our advocacy of diverse neighborhoods. We want to live in these cities that are intersections of the world. We're not scared of immigrant and ethnic presence. It creates a healthy tension that challenges us. And unfortunately, these kinds of neighborhoods that we say we want to build are not in fact what we are building. And this is from Canada 25, that there are 3 elements to a great city. And I'm not going to go through this in detail with you today, but they are density, diversity, and a sense of discovery. When you have those 3 Ds mixing together in a city, that's how you have a city that works, that continues to have economic and social development, and that continues to attract talent from around the world. There are many, many ways to achieve that, and those include fighting urban sprawl. We don't do a very good job of that here. Creating new transportation strategies, improving human potential and social inclusion and poverty, maximizing the benefits of immigration, working on economic development, fostering creativity and culture, building great universities, but the most important one is the one at the bottom. Increasing civic engagement. People need to feel as though they belong to, have voice, as Jay was telling us, in their communities in order for all the rest of this to happen and all of the rest of this to work together. So the last thing I'm going to show you is I'm not a very good academic because I always want to think about practical outcomes. This map is a map of the City of Calgary recreational facilities. Wherever you see a blotch, right, that's where we built a recreational facility. Let's draw that same red line. Isn't that interesting? So what that suggests to me is that if you truly want to build neighborhoods that are welcoming to everyone, that welcome participation from everyone, from the rich and the poor, in fact, what you need to do is overinvest in those neighborhoods that are seen by real estate agents as less desirable in order to create that kind of mixing. Just as importantly as it is to invest in things like affordable housing to create the mixing on the other side. I want to leave you with one challenge. Even look around the room today at the folks who are interested in getting engaged in the future of the community and in building this sort of community, and think to yourself, who's not in the room? Whose voice is not being heard? Are we doing a good job of reflecting the kind of community we live in and the kind of community that we want to live in as we think about what we're trying to build? And if those people aren't in the room, if the voice is not here, let's think hard about how we can not just hear, but respond to, communicate, and converse with those voices. And that is what I will leave you with today. Thank you.